and then we'll start our discussion. I'll not go into the basic details saying that how many questions come from IR. All of you are giving mains. Majority of you are giving mains. So you don't need to, you must have gone through the test series papers as well as the UPSC previous year question papers. So you know that the weightage of IR and security is of 50 marks each, 50 marks in GS2 and 50 marks in GS3. And that cumulative comes out to be around 100 marks. So 100 marks, it is very important for you to secure. We will try to finish IR and security in as short classes as possible because already we are running late. So I'll not take much of your time. Today it is the first class, so we'll go a little slow. Then we'll also increase the speed as well as the duration of the classes that we are going to take. For example, we'll take average class about 2.5 to 3 hours on a daily basis to complete the course by the next Sunday. We don't have a class scheduled on Monday. I'll make sure that a class is scheduled on Monday as well so that we can complete the course in the given time frame. This is what we'll follow. We'll straight jump off to the discussion. We'll first deal with IR, and then we will deal with the other subjects that we are getting. For example, we'll first do with the IR, and then we'll go in the security part. In the security part, already you have been provided with the booklet of, I think that it has been shared on the group, or if it is not, I'll share it again on the group. That is our basic security booklet of around 80-100 pages. Security is relatively static. Whatever the topics that have come to in recent time, for example, increasing incidences of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, why there is an increasing trend, what is the changing trend, or whatever things that were in news regarding defense modernization, or when we talk about the issues related to the problem of drug culture, the resurgence of demand of Khalistan, we'll do it again now in this security class. Only that will be updated, so it will be update of around 20 pages, not more than that in internal security. In internal security, the trend has been the same. They have some themes like that of terrorism, Naxalism, etc., terror financing, etc. From there, they have been asking the question. And the trend more or less is going to be remain the same. So we'll cover that also comprehensively. But in the time period, in this week only, what you can do, IR will be covered comprehensively, security will be also covered comprehensively, but you can read that 80 pages on your own such that you will have the understanding of what we are going to do in the future. The security, the IR compass you will get by Monday. So you will also have, we have made the IR compass very short. Last year, the IR compass was bulky. This year, we have just focused on what they are going to ask. Every country is covered in one page front and one page back. Every country has been covered in that sense. So you do not need to follow any other source. Just follow the class. Just go through the book once, because the compass is just a repetition of class, or the class is just a repetition of compass. The two things are not separate. And I think you have the basic understanding. Many of you might be giving their second or third attempt. So you have the basic understanding. All of you might have done your foundation studies. So there is not clarity that is needed regarding the basic principles. So we will not stick to the basic things, but rather directly switch to the things that are important from the perspective of our mains examination. So I hope this message was clear to you. If you have any doubt before that we start, you can ask, then we will proceed our discussion with. Anyone has any doubt, they can ask it now. Then we'll take the doubt at the last.
हेलो।
हाँ बोलिए।
हाँ सर, बस एक रिक्वेस्ट रहेगी आपसे कि आप जो भी टॉपिक कराए उसे क्वेश्चन आंसर फॉर्मेट में कराएं, क्योंकि अभी टाइम कम है, तो सीधा क्रिस्प में जो चीज एग्जैक्टली उस तरीके से आ सके तो वो बेटर रहेगा सर।
श्योर द क्लास इज डिजाइन इन सच अ वे, मैं आपको पढ़ाऊंगा नहीं कि ये ऐसा था वैसा था, वो कुछ नहीं पढ़ाऊंगा। मैं आपको बताऊंगा क्या चैलेंजेस है, क्या सोल्यूशन है, क्या वे फॉरवर्ड है, क्या प्रॉब्लम्स है। ऐसे ही पढ़ेंगे, सारे क्लासेस ऐसे ही पढ़ेंगे। सिंपल चैलेंज एग्जाम में दे विल आस्क यू द चैलेंजेस, द वे फॉरवर्ड एक्सेट्रा। एवरी क्वेश्चन यू विल बी एबल टू आंसर विच विल कम ईदर डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली। तो हमें कुछ ज्यादा दिमाग नहीं लगाना है अपना, ठीक है, कि हमें उसका हिस्टोरिक पता होना चाहिए, कुछ भी नहीं पता होना चाहिए। चैलेंजेस की स्लाइड्स मिलेगी, चैलेंजेस रटो, 4 चैलेंजेस है, उसमें भी आपको हेडिंग रटनी है, ठीक है। अंदर वाला यू कैन राइट इट ऑन योर ओन। आई थिंक यू ऑल आर केपेबल इनफ, यू ऑल हैव ग्रेजुएटेड फ्रॉम कॉलेजेस, तो आपको सब कुछ आएगा लिखना अंदर। बस वो पॉइंट समझना उसमें लिखना क्या है। Economic partnership में क्या लिखना है? Economic partnership, why it is important, you understand that, which I will also explain in the class, but you have to just understand the basic points. Try to remember just the basic points. That will be very beneficial for you to maximize your output using these classes. Okay, so with this, we will begin our discussion on the IR and security. We'll first start with IR. The first thing that we'll cover in IR is basically the trends in the global order. We'll generally discuss what is global order. First, we'll have a small discussion on global order. Then the second order of discussion that we will have is the foreign policy, how it is changing. And then we'll start with the neighborhood. So we'll start in this manner. From neighborhood, we'll move to the extended neighborhood, then to the big powers, and then general trends in IR, and we'll finish the IR. This is what the scheme of topics will be in IR. So the first topic that we are going to understand, already they have asked a question in the previous year regarding the Cold War, etc., and trends in global order. So global order becomes very important. What is the trend in the IR today? What is the emerging global order? Let us understand that. What is the trend in the emerging global order today? What is the changes in the order that we are seeing today? See, all of you might be knowing that there is a growing conflict. There is a growing conflict and this conflict is going on between Ukraine and Russia. So when the conflict is going on between Ukraine and Russia, so what is the first trend in the changing global order today? It is the reinforcement of transatlantic relations. Reinforcement of transatlantic relations. What do we mean by that? The basic meaning of that is a resurgence of ties between the NATO countries or the European countries and that of US. Why this has happened? Why NATO has become stronger? Because of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Earlier, under Donald Trump was basically criticizing, or the US at that point of time was basically criticizing NATO and the countries of the Europe of not contributing enough to the cause of NATO and the cause of security. Now, what has happened after the Ukraine being attacked by Russia? That NATO is expanding. The great NATO is growing, and this has led to reinforcement of transatlantic ties between the first world countries. So, आपको ये words याद रखने हैं. Reinforcement. When you will write your answer, you need to quote this. See, everyone can write an answer on IR. I think every one of you is capable enough. You have done your foundation, you are giving multiple means. So everyone is capable enough to write the answers. The only thing that will distinguish you from rest of the people is the terminology that you use, particularly in IR and security. This is true for every subject, but we are talking about IR and security, so I will restrict myself to that. You have to use specific terms, that is reinforcement of transatlantic relations, a reinforcement of ties or a resurgence of ties between the first world countries, or what we call as the Western countries. So this is the changing global order. This was on a decline, but now it is resurging. First thing is that. What is the second thing? A new energy order. Now the world is moving away from what we call as the dependence on the crude oil. All over the world, there is a new partnership. This partnership is for the focus on new and renewable sources of energy. Why there is a new order again emerging? So you can see it with the level played by US in providing security and in providing securing the area of West Asia. Why it is changing today? What is the change today? Because US has discovered what we call as shale gas. First thing is that when they have discovered the shale gas, they are not dependent on the Middle Eastern countries or the West Asian countries anymore. The level of dependence has decreased. Still, they are importing oil, but the level of dependence has been decreasing. Furthermore, there is a growing concern regarding the climate change. So every country in the world, particularly the Western countries, are pushing for new and renewable sources of energy. So a new energy order is placing up. Now you might think that this new energy order is being restricted only to the Western country, but it is not the case. Even the West Asian countries that have gained economic surplus, that have the economic footing. ये economic footing कहाँ से आई है? Because of their years of trade of crude oil. Now they are also diversifying themselves. So for example, you may see that UAE is investing heavily in countries like India, or UAE is trying to sponsor back channel diplomacy between India and Pakistan. Saudi Arabia has come out with a vision document. So this vision document, they have identified 8 strategic partner countries. All of this you will get in notes also. So you don't need to panic that where we'll find all these arguments. Just understand this. You have to just write this point. New energy order is emerging. Why this new energy order is emerging? Because of the decrease of dependence of the Western countries on the what we called as conventional sources of energy. Secondly, due to climate change. And third, due to own movement by the West Asian countries or the oil producing countries towards a diversified economy, wherein UAE is producing for investment in countries like India or the developing economies, which have massive infrastructural needs. First thing is that Saudi Arabia has come out with a vision document. They have also come out with a harmonization plan with China. Why they have come out with this? Because they also want to diversify their economy and just not being dependent on the oil producing status, because they know oil is a finite source and every other country is diversifying their energy basket. So Saudi Arabia has identified 8 strategic partners, out of which when we study Saudi Arabia, I will also tell you that out of this 8 partners, one country is also India. These strategic partners, they are looking for developing the partnership or taking the partnership to the next level. So a new energy order is also an emerging trend in the global order. So first is reinforcement of transatlantic relations. Second is new energy order. Now shifting focus from Indo-Pacific. Now what has happened after 2016 or after 2013 when the Belt and Road Initiative was announced? In order to counter China, US has been pushing for the cause of Asia Pacific. First, they pushed for the cause of Asia Pacific, then they transformed it to the cause of Indo-Pacific. पहले वो Asia Pacific बोलते थे, फिर उन्होंने उसको Indo-Pacific बना दिया, because India was seen as a counterweight as to China. So it was called as Indo-Pacific. Now what is happening? Because of the conflict that are happening in European continental mass or European landmass, what is happening? There is a shift from Indo-Pacific again. Now there are new theaters of war. Indo-Pacific is still an area of conflict, but now there is a shift in focus from just being Indo-Pacific. Otherwise, when you see the presidency of Donald Trump, everything was focused on Indo-Pacific. There was excessive reliance on Indo-Pacific. There was issues of trade wars between US and China, etc. But this trend has changed now. Now, which is the focus now? The focus is on Europe, due to conflict between what we call as the Ukraine and Russia. And secondly, the other area of focus is also in the West Asia or the Middle Eastern region. West Asia or the Middle Eastern region. This is also a new area of conflict because of the conflict between Israel, Hamas, and the growing tension between Israel and its neighbors like that of Jordan, Lebanon, and also countries like that of Iran being involved. And what is the shift from Indo-Pacific? Not just in Europe, not just in Middle East, but also in securing what we call as sea lines of communication. Sea lines of communication. So you have to quote the specific example of Red Sea here, where the Red Sea, which is a major transport shipment line, it is being attacked. It is being attacked by what? It is being attacked by the Houthi rebels. So this is the third trend in the emerging global order, that the focus or excessive reliance on the Indo-Pacific is now shifting. The fourth thing that is happening, that there are now questions on the US hegemony, because US is shying away from its responsibility. It is shying away from its responsibility. For example, Ukraine has been consistently saying that please include us in NATO, but they have been denying the same. First thing is that they have been denying that they should be included in NATO. And they are providing the support in the form of humanitarian aid or also in the form of financial aid, and even sometimes what we call as arms and ammunition, but they are not including them in NATO. First thing is that. Second thing is what they are doing, that they have basically recused themselves because you can see that US has withdrawn from Afghanistan. US is shying away from its duties in the countries like that of West Asia. So what is the impact? That there are questions on the US hegemony. As a hegemon, what is the responsibility of hegemon? Though this is not in consideration with your IR, but just for your understanding, I'm explaining you, the hegemon has a duty. They have to spend financially and militarily in order to maintain their hegemony, which US has been continuously doing since the end or since the disintegration of USSR. But now with the economic crisis happening in US post 2008 global financial crisis, there have been questions on the US hegemony and they have been withdrawing from this. So there are questions on the US hegemony, that what will happen and whether US will be able to shoulder the responsibility. This comes at a time where there is a massive growth or increase in the power of China, not only in the military terms, not only in the economic terms, but also in diplomatic terms, wherein China was able to broker a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and that of Iran. So all these are just examples of the same. इसके अंदर आपको सिर्फ example लिखना होता है, explain करना होता है इस point को, और you have to just write an example. Nothing else. बस आपको इतना कर दोगे तो वो समझ जाएगा कि he has a very good, he or she has a very good understanding about the question that has been asked. Now, there is also increasing security situation. For example, this security competition is increasing in Europe. This security competition is increasing in Europe with the expansion of NATO. Expansion of NATO is happening, not with the case of Ukraine, but with the other countries like that of Sweden and Finland. NATO is expanding. With the NATO expanding in its area, there are problems or there are chances that in future there can be an increased conflict between the countries. So security competition in Europe is another thing that is happening with the expansion of NATO. Now, what is the impact? You have to just write one word in this, that it is basically raising what we call as a security dilemma. इसको एक ही चीज बोलते हैं, इसको आपको IR के terms में बोलते हैं. With the expansion of NATO, what is happening in Europe and the areas around it, it is increasing the security dilemma. Just write this word. The examiner is capable enough, he will understand what do you want to convey. Examiner बेवकूफ नहीं है, उसको सब समझ में आता है कि आप क्या करना चाहते हो. When you will use the word of security dilemma, he will realize that he has an understanding. So what we are doing, we are summarizing a very big point into a single word called as security dilemma. With the expansion of NATO, there is an increasing chances of conflict in future because of the increasing security dilemma between the countries. Which are the countries in the play here? It is Russia, because Russia sees the Eastern European countries still as its backyard, as a reminiscent of its power from USSR, and basically the expansion of NATO, which is seen as a military alliance between the countries of Europe and the US on the other side. So this is what is being happening in this area. Now, what is the next trend that is happening in the changing global order? That there is formation of alliances. Formation of alliances, and particularly important among these alliances is the formation of alliance between Russia and China. There is a growing concretization of alliance between Russia and China. रशिया और चाइना के बीच में सबसे बड़ा अलायंस बना है आज की डेट में. This formation of alliance between Russia and China is most important for us to understand. Why? Because this is an alliance where it has been dubbed by some of the international scholars. We will not write it, and if we have to write it, we will always put it in the name of international scholars, that some of the international scholars believe that this cooperation mechanism or this formation of axis between Russia and China is a cooperation of alliance of autocracies, like both the countries are termed to be autocracies by some of the international scholars, and both the countries are basically standing against or are having an anti-Western connotation against the rise of US. So they want a new world order and they want a new international economic order. So this is what is happening. So you will just write this point as heading: Russia-China axis is concretizing. And how it is concretizing? It is concretizing with the formation of alliance between the two countries, where they want a new international economic order and a new world order, which they feel which should not be dominated by US. So this is the next thing that is happening. Then what is happening? Cold War 2.0 is taking place. We'll study Cold War 2.0 in a separate topic. So I'll explain you Cold War 2.0, how it is happening. Then we have crumbling Washington Consensus Order. Crumbling Washington Consensus. What do we understand by crumbling Washington Consensus? The crumbling Washington Consensus was that Washington Consensus came out in 1990s. Washington Consensus is similar to what the policies we have adopted under LPG, that is decreasing the role of state, decreasing the burden of the state. So this was a Washington Consensus where it was advised that the countries who are just coming out of the control of USSR, as well as the other European countries, to decrease the role of the state and give the space to the private sector. But what is happening that the countries world over today, capitalism is facing challenges. हो क्या रहा है पूरी कंट्री में वर्ल्ड ओवर क्या हो रहा है कैपिटलिज्म टुडे इज फेसिंग चैलेंजेस globalization is declining. So globalization, which is an important component, which we have studied in LPG also, you might have studied in economy also, LPG, privatization and globalization. Both privatization means capitalism. So capitalism is on a decline and globalization is also declining. So what does it indicate? That the ideals that we have envisaged in 1990 with the Washington Consensus, which India adopted as LPG policies, there is a crumbling order, and the countries all over the world have seen a rise of rightist parties. Rise of rightist parties हो रहा है और socialist policies. The parties that are coming in power are basically supporter of socialist parties. So there is a crumbling of Washington Consensus order that was envisaged in 1990. And what is crumbling of Washington Consensus order? A decline in capitalism, a question mark over the future of capitalism, and also a question mark over globalization. So this is happening. And now what is happening, the last trend that is happening, it is the challenges in the global south. What do we call as the global south? So we have three divisions during the time of Cold War. The first world countries were the US and its European counterparts. The second world countries were the countries who are part of the USSR or who have embraced a communist ideology. And the third world countries included countries like that of India and that Africa and South America that were recently gaining their independence. So these are today also classified as the countries of global south. So what is happening if you see condition around India, if you see the condition of Africa, what is happening there? There in Africa, you will see repeated incidences of military coup. You have seen the incidents of military coup happening in Myanmar. You have seen the political crisis in Sri Lanka. You have seen the political crisis in Pakistan. Recently, you must have seen the political crisis in Bangladesh. So what is happening? That is global south countries, not only they are facing the problem of economic crisis, but they are now also facing the challenges due to political instability, and their political order is under question mark now. So this is the emerging global order as we see today. So this was about the changing nature of the global order and the emergence of the global order. I repeat again, you just need to remember these points. You will be able to fill them. Just write one or two line in explanation and give an example for the thing. Nothing else. The examiner is smart enough to understand what do you want to convey. Just give specific example and give one or two line of basically explanation for the same. I think this was basically clear. So we'll move on to the next topic under this same changing global order. ये clear था? आगे बढ़े?
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, I had network issues. Can you please repeat the point? Reinforce transatlantic relations.
Okay. Reinforced transatlantic relations was basically nothing. What has happened during the presidency of Donald Trump in US, he was basically criticizing the European countries of not contributing enough to the cause of NATO, to the cause of IMF, to the cause of World Bank, etc. He was criticizing them. He was saying that every burden has to be borne by US only. And US is basically supplying all the things. And he had followed the policy of America first. So he was basically accusing America of the duties that it was being doing in the past. So, but what has happened now, that because of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and because of the future possibility of Russia also increasing its influence in the other European countries, the European countries have come together, and so this has also been US also together. So what is happening? The US and the European countries have now also joined together. So all the so all the crises that were happening during the time of Donald Trump, where there was severe question mark on the transatlantic unity between US and the European countries, is now moving away. And what is the testimony for the same? Increasing NATO, expansion of NATO, and also growing cooperation between US and the European countries. So this is what we call as reinforced transatlantic relationship.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll move to the second topic. That is, what is Cold War 2.2? You might have heard about the Cold War in world history. You might have studied the Cold War in world history. So we'll not go into that. What is Cold War and what was the effect? How was it like? It is a part of your world history. You might have gained the knowledge. What is Cold War 2.0? What is Cold War? How is Cold War shaping up today? And how it is different from the earlier Cold War? One thing is to understand that the new Cold War primarily is being basically told about that it is between US and China. The new Cold War or the Cold War 2.0, it is said that it is between US and China because the hegemony of US is now being challenged by the second most strong country in the world, which is China. And only the China has the military and the economic capacity to present and challenge to China, US. So what is the difference between the first Cold War and the second Cold War? The difference between the two is that there is a lot of, like, the similarity is here. The conflict at that point of time was between US and USSR. Now the conflict is between US and China. But there are key differences between Cold War 1 and Cold War 2. What is the differences? Let us understand them one by one. Firstly, there is a rise of middle powers. When Cold War was happening between US and the USSR, there was no rise of middle powers. But now there are countries which are very strong independently also, which includes countries like that of India, which includes countries like that of Japan. It includes countries like that of Saudi Arabia, Turkey. All of these countries have now also become very strong or have gained prominence in the international affairs. So what is the impact? That there is a rise of middle powers. And this middle powers also have a say. So this was a missing feature in the first Cold War. But this is the changing trend in the second Cold War. Second thing is that there is a rise of multipolarity. Multipolarity means multiple poles of power. Now, during the time of Cold War, there was a bipolar world. The conflict was between US and the USSR. Now, today the conflict might be between US and China, but India is also a very strong country. India is also a very strong pole. Russia, though not economically that strong, but Russia still has a very strong military power. Even Japan is a very strong financial power. There are other countries like that of UK, etc., which are also very strong economically, or the countries like Germany. So what we are seeing today, that today we are not living in a bipolar world, but we are living in a multipolar world with different countries being different powerful in the terms of military and the economic terms, even in the cultural terms. So a country, in order to become a superpower, needs three things. That is economic superiority, military superiority, and cultural superiority. So what is happening today? There are multiple countries are present today which are having powers in this sense. So rise of middle powers and multipolarity are the two features which makes Cold War 2.0 different from the first Cold War. Now, what is the third thing that is happening? Strong interdependency. If you see US and the USSR, these countries were not trading. These have formed the blocks and they were not trading with each other. But when you see US and China today, which we say that the Cold War 2.0 is happening between US and China, when you see these two countries are very strong. These two countries might be opponent of each other. We have seen this with the example of what we call as trade war, etc. But still you will see that these are the largest trade partners for each other. So the level of economic interdependence is very strong in the Cold War 2.2. And this makes it different from what we call as the Cold War 1.2. The level of economic interdependence, which was missing in the erstwhile Cold War, is a regular phenomena in the Cold War 2.0. Even if you say the example of India and China, we have a problematic relationship with China. But still, India and China are one of the largest trade partners for each. So economic interdependency is also a feature which was missing in the Cold War 1.0, but it is a common phenomena in the Cold War 2.0. Now, what we see about the cooperation, we have seen in the last slide that there is a formation of axis between Russia and China. Though there is a formation of axis between Russia and China, both the countries want the reform world order, a reform international order. But you have to understand one more thing. Then there might be an axis between Russia and China, but the level of military partnership, this partnership is primarily in the field of economic partnership. जो ये है economic and diplomatic partnership. This cooperation between Russia and China is in the terms of economic and diplomatic partnership. Russia needs China's support at the level of UN and other international levels. And Russia is 1/10 of the Chinese economy. So Russia needs China for economic support. That is why you will see projects like Power of Siberia 1, Power of Siberia 2, multi-billion-dollar projects, $200, $400 billion projects. But when you talk about the military cooperation, this level of cooperation between Russia and China is still very less. They have not entered into armed pacts. They have not entered into armed pacts that was a regular feature. For example, formation of NATO during Cold War. For example, formation of Warsaw Pact during Cold War. Such alliances are not being formed. Such pacts are not being signed. So what does this indicate? This indicates that though we are living in the era of new Cold War or Cold War 2.0, another thing that separates it from the old Cold War is basically one simple thing, that the military alliances are not strong and they are not forming. This is what makes them different from the Cold War 1.0. Lack of ideological coalition. Today, we are seeing a conflict between US and China. If we say that the Cold War 2.0 is only between US and China, we are seeing that today there is no ideological coalition. Earlier Cold War was a conflict between the capitalist and the communist ideology. China may continue to call itself as a communist country. But when we analyze the economic prosperity of China, it is not dependent on the capitalist model. So there is no ideological coalition, there is no conflict between capitalism and communism today that it should be adopted or it should be used as a medium of economic stimulus or economic method to be adopted by a country. So what makes Cold War 2.0 different from the old Cold War is basically lack of any kind of ideological coalition that can be there. Then the next thing is that lack of formation of ironclad alliances. That time, for example, there was alliance in form of the NATO Pact, there was Marshall Aid, there was the Warsaw Pact or NATO alliances. These alliances are not forming today. There is no, they are coming together, they are saying that their partnership is very deep. They have a similar agenda of a non-hegemonic US domination. But there is no formation of ironclad alliances today. And this is what makes it different from the erstwhile Cold War. The focus is on regional theaters. The Cold War is not being fought like the previous Cold War. The new Cold War is not being fought across the world. But there is focus on regional theaters. What are these regional theaters? These regional theaters are in the theaters of West Asia, Indo-Pacific, and also in the terms of what we can today call as Russia and Ukraine or the European countries. So these are restricted to the regional space. These are not happening across the world simultaneously. For example, when Cold War was happening, there was conflict in South America, which we called as the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was conflict in Africa. There was conflict in Korea. There was conflict in Vietnam. There was conflict in Afghanistan. But today it is not a sense. The focus is on regional theaters. The focus is on regional theaters. Why? Because these are the areas of conflict that is between US and China. For example, the case of Indo-Pacific. For example, the case of formation of alliance between Russia and China and the conflict in the area of Ukraine. So focus today is on regional theaters rather than having conflict in all the geographical continents that we have. So this is what makes Cold War 2.0 different from the first Cold War. And the last thing is that if we can say that the new Cold War is not primarily a conflict between US and China. So we have to defend this. The new Cold War is not basically a conflict between US and China. It is not simple to explain that it is a conflict between US and China and we can explain that. No. The new Cold War appears to be also a case for a challenge to the US hegemony. The new Cold War appears to be a challenge to the US hegemony. A world order which is not dominated by US is what we are seeing in the trend of a new Cold War. Rather than just seeing is a trend between US and China, it is a trend to the US hegemony. And there are many players who are challenging the US hegemony. These players are with example of Russia. So Russia is also an important player. This example is that of China. China is also a very important player in this sense. What are the other countries? Iran is also saying that I do not want to be dominated by US. North Korea is also saying that we do not want to be dominated by US. Even the countries like that of what we call as Turkey is also saying that we do not want to be dominated by US in whatever they say that we have to implement it. Even the countries like that of Pakistan is saying now today that we do not want to be dominated by US. So what does it indicate? It indicates that Cold War, or the new Cold War, or the Cold War 2.0, is not just an area of conflict between US and China. It may appear to be an area of conflict between US and China for the domination of the world, but it is primarily against the domination of any single country led by the US. It is a challenge to the US hegemony. So these are the features of the Cold War 2.0. If we are clear on that, we'll proceed further. I hope we are clear on the difference between the old Cold War and the new Cold War. So we'll proceed further. So if you get a question in examination that you may get a question on what is the changing global order, or you might get analyze the trends in the changing global order. So you have to write these points. The second question that you might get, that today world is witnessing a new Cold War. What are the features of the new Cold War and how it is different from the old Cold War? You have to write these points. Just remember these points. Just make a mind map of these points. IR has one good thing, that there is a lot of duplication. बहुत सारे डुप्लीकेशन होता है तो बहुत टफ नहीं होता है, इसलिए IR लास्ट में क्लास होती है, क्योंकि बहुत ज्यादा टफ नहीं होता है. आपको बस एक माइंड मैप बनाना है कि मुझे ये पॉइंट डालने हैं इसमें और टर्मिनोलॉजी यूज करनी है, बस और कुछ नहीं. You will be able to write each and everything under this. Quote specific example, don't quote wrong examples. Use the terminologies and just make a mind map which will make your job very simpler. सब चीज के ऐसा गोला बना लो, माइंड मैप बना लो, उसको याद रखो, बस उसको देखो, उसके अंदर आप लिख दो. Don't get panic due to this. Now, the next thing that we understand with regard to India. Now we'll consider with regard to India, how we will place India in this new Cold War, because we are preparing for the UPSC civil services. That is an exam for India. So we have to understand how we'll shape India in this new Cold War. So what is India doing in this new Cold War? India is basically exercising its trend of strategic autonomy. India is basically using its strategic autonomy. What do you mean by use of strategic autonomy? Strategic autonomy means that a country is basically allowed to practice its individual foreign policy in a sense that it can weigh what will be good for it and what will be bad for it. We will not be dictated by any of the country in making our foreign policy decisions. So strategic autonomy, if we have to define, it means that it gives the ability to a country to practice an independent foreign policy and not under the coercion of any of the alliances or partners. So US cannot dictate us, Russia cannot dictate us, China cannot dictate us. No country in this world can dictate what India wants to do. And this is what we are following in this era of Cold War. And how it is replicated? It is replicated by the fact that we have a still very strong defense relationship with Russia. We are still the country who have imported oil from Russia in the event of Russia-Ukraine war, despite of the criticism by the European countries and that of US. We still imported it. Because why? Because it was important for our energy security needs. We are an energy dependent nation. We are an energy deficit nation. So we need imports of energy. So we imported energy from Russia. We were criticized by the European counterparts. We were criticized by US that you are sponsoring war. But we practiced on the same. This is the example of strategic autonomy in action. We might be aligned with, we have signed 4 foundational agreements with US. We are seen very close to US today. But this doesn't mean that we will decrease our partnership with Russia. We are seen closer to US. This doesn't mean that we will support US in all its stand. So US might be supporting Israel in its conflict against Hamas, but India is not supporting the same. Rather, what India has done, India has voted in the favor of the statehood to be recognized to Palestine in UN. Recently, we have voted in the favor of the statehood to be granted to Palestine to be included as a full-time member of UN. What does this indicate? This indicates that we are practicing these are examples of how India is practicing on its strategic autonomy. We are still the member of BRICS. BRICS has countries like China and Russia. Both of these countries are against US. So, but we are still the member of BRICS. At the same time, we are balancing it with being the member of I2U2 and the recently floated IMEC, India Middle Eastern European Economic Corridor. So what does it indicate? That India is practicing a foreign policy where it is benefiting from any kind of partnership which is important in terms of its political stability, its international presence, its energy security, or its economic partnership. We will not shy away, and we will be very vocal about what we want to achieve or convey through our policies. We are not shying away from this. So India as a whole is following this strategic autonomy. Why we are following strategic autonomy? Because it helps in us to maintain neutrality. It helps India to maintain neutrality. This is the first thing that we achieve through strategic autonomy, that it helps us to maintain neutrality. We can take a neutral decision. If we would have been a part of alliance led by China and Russia, or an alliance, we are basically led by US. So we will be then dictated in terms of our foreign policy decision by US or either by Russia or China. But not being a part of any alliance and restricting to our core principles, we have ensured that we maintain this neutrality in taking the international affairs decision. So there is a term that is used for this, that if you want to explain strategic autonomy, that India is allied. India is allied, but India is not aligned. India is allied, but India is not aligned. This is our core principle or core motto of strategic autonomy. India is allied. Where India is allied? Wherever the interest and the principles of a rule-based order are being upheld. कहीं इंडिया के इंटरेस्ट है एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी का, so we are allied. US, we need support in the defense partnership, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, so we are allied. We are a member of Quad. But this doesn't mean that we will not practice our individual foreign policy. So India is allied on the interest wherever there is energy interest, security interest, defense interest, economic interest, etc. But this allied doesn't mean that we are aligned completely. So this is what we follow in strategic autonomy. Allied, but not aligned. Okay. It enables to resist the pressure from any of the counter countries like that of Russia, China, or US. It gives primacy to our national interests. So what is foreign policy? Foreign policy, what is the basic definition of foreign policy? The basic definition of foreign policy is very simple. Foreign policy has been basically defined as a predisposed set of guidelines. Predisposed set of guidelines that a country will follow to maximize its national interest and minimize its losses while dealing with other countries. And this can be determined through various factors like that of history, geographical location, economic position in the world, etc. So what do we understand by foreign policy? That it is a predisposed set of guidelines that a country follows in order to maximize its national interest. And by using strategic autonomy as a tool of foreign policy, we are able to give primacy to the national interest. तो ये भी हमारा एक थिंग है. तो अगर आपको एक क्वेश्चन आएगा व्हाट डू यू अंडरस्टैंड बाय स्ट्रैटेजिक ऑटोनॉमी, सो देयर यू हैव टू डिफाइन व्हाट इज स्ट्रैटेजिक ऑटोनॉमी फर्स्ट, and then you have to give this example that why India is following. It gives boost to India's image in the developing world. So we want to champion ourselves for the cause of global south and that of developing world, or what we can understand in layman terms as the concept of Vishwa Guru. ठीक है, हम यही सब तो करना चाहते हैं. So by following a strategic autonomy, by not being aligned with any country, we are pushing our credentials as a champion of the developing world. It gives an image, it gives an opportunity to India to boost its soft power credential. It gives boost to our soft power credential, and it gives a role for India to act as a mediator for global peace and security. It gives a chance to the India to act as a mediator for global peace and security. What do you understand by the global peace and security? Global peace and security here means one simple thing. क्या होता है global peace और security यहाँ पे? Global peace or security यहाँ पे, this we have done in the past. So there can be a question that why India is still progressing on the strategic autonomy, where India should be clearly aligned with the countries either on the side of US or Russia or China. But why we are giving? Because we have done this in the past. When the world was divided between the two blocks, India followed the policy of NAM. And strategic autonomy is nothing but NAM in a different avatar. What is strategic autonomy? Strategic autonomy is nothing but a reinforced principles as under NAM. We are following NAM with a different name, which is called as strategic autonomy today. So what we are saying, at that point of time, we were also playing the role of a mediator. So we were part of a group where the decision was to be taken between Israel and Palestine. We were part of the, or we are head of the commission, which was established for the principles of North Korea. Why we were part of that? Why we were the head of the commission on the issue of North and the South Korea, or regarding the Israel and the Palestine? Because we were a neutral country. We were out of the bloc politics. And we had the international status. That is why India was chosen, despite just getting its independence in 1947. So this is what we want to project. It gives us an opportunity to project ourselves as a mediator. Now you will see that India is playing a role of a mediator. Still, Narendra Modi is on a visit to what we call as Ukraine. So how India is able to balance its relationship with both Ukraine and Russia, wherein India has been saying on different platforms, whether it is SCO, whether it is in bilateral meets, India has been replicating it with Russia, that this is not an era of war, this is an era of development, peace, and this is not an era of conflict. So this gives us a chance of playing a role of a mediation. So these are the reasons why we follow strategic autonomy. These are the advantages of following strategic autonomy. What is the further reasons that we are following strategic autonomy? One reason is that we are not a continental power, meaning thereby India is not just a continental power, it is also a maritime power. So it is not like that India has to maintain good relationship only with its neighborhood. We have a very large coastline, so we need to maintain good relationship even with the African counterparts, or even in the littoral states of the Indian Ocean region. And for this, we need to boost our naval capacities. So in order to boost our naval capacity, we need partnership. This partnership is seen in the form of Quad. So India is both a continental power as well as a maritime power. So when India is both a continental power as well as a maritime power, this gives supports to India, and this pushes India to follow a policy of strategic autonomy. Second thing is that the US might say that you are, or European countries say that you are not following the same. So we need to understand that it is not only that India is following this policy. Even the partners of the US under NATO or under any other alliance, they are also following the principles of strategic autonomy. The Europe might have criticized India for importing oil from Russia and sponsoring the Russia-Ukrainian war. But at the same time, European countries are also importing gas from Russia. So what do we understand? That the US partners are also following the same. So what gives the basis for India to follow strategic autonomy? First thing is that we live in a multipolar world. We do not live in a unipolar or bipolar world that we will just align with one country or another country. First thing is that we live in a multipolar world. And multipolar world basically gives us the opportunity as well as the motive to go for multi-alignment. This gives us the opportunity as well as the motive to go for multi-alignment. First thing is that we live in a multipolar world. Second thing is that we are a historical basis. We have been following the policy of NAM in the past. So why not strategic autonomy today when the world is much more complex? Third thing is that we are not just a continental power. We need a maritime. We are also a maritime power. So we are both a continental as well as a maritime power. When we are both a continental as well as a maritime power, we need to maintain relationship with multiple countries to secure our continental as well as maritime interests. And the fourth thing is that even the US allies are also following the policy of strategic autonomy. So why should India shy away from following the policy of strategic autonomy? If we have energy security needs, if we have energy needs, we'll fulfill it. US allies are also fulfilling the same. The NATO members are also doing the same. So why should India shy away? So these are the benefits of following the policy of strategic autonomy. What is strategic autonomy? I've also explained you, where a country is having no coercion to follow a specific guideline and can take its own independent foreign policy decision, weighing in the positive and negative of such decisions. No external influence is there on taking any decision. Have we done it in the past? Yes, we have done it in the past. What are the benefits that are listed on your screen? Why should we follow it? I have explained it to you. So if there is a question on strategic autonomy, you have to explain this. But this strategic autonomy and following the same also come with its own set of criticism. So first we'll see the criticism, then we'll see how India is reflecting its strategic autonomy. What is the criticism of this strategic autonomy? The first criticism of this strategic autonomy is that India remains a fence sitter. India is just sitting on the fence. So what countries criticize India? That you are saying that India is projecting itself as a Vishwa Guru. This was one of the motive while we are pushing for the G20. So the world today is saying that you are saying that you want to be a Vishwa Guru, you want a rule-based order. But whenever the question will come about taking any particular stand, you will just sit on the fence. You will just sit on the fence and you will say that this is not my we have both friendship with Ukraine, we have solidarity with Ukraine, but we also have a friendship with Russia, so we cannot criticize Russia. We made sure that Russia was not criticized in the New Delhi declaration that was signed at G20. So this is the criticism that they say, that India just plays the role of a fence sitter, not taking any principled stand in regard to the challenges faced by the world today. Rather, it sits back and it enjoys and it basically exploits the things. For example, it takes the benefit from the subsidized crude oil by Russia. So this is what we call as fence sitter attitude, and the corollary to that is supporting the aggressors, where European countries and even the US has criticized India of sponsoring the Russian war against the Ukraine. Why? Because they are saying that you are basically supplying with the necessary financial help that is needed by Russia to sustain this war by purchasing subsidized crude oil from Russia. So you are indirectly supporting the aggressors. You are not directly supporting Russia, but by economically helping them, you are indirectly supporting the aggressors. So this is the second criticism that the strategic autonomy gets. The first is just playing the role of a fence sitter. Second is supporting the aggressors. Third is formation of new alliances. They are saying that this strategic autonomy is leading to formation of new alliances, what we call as, in some countries it is also called as alliances of democracy versus the alliances of autocracy, or the formation of axis of resistance. Now, alliance of democracy, international scholars say it is an alliance between democratic countries like that of India, US, Japan, etc. on one side. An alliance of autocracies, on the other hand, is countries like Iran, Russia, and China on the other. So new alliances are being formed, and you are a part of multiple alliances. You are having good relationship with Iran also. You are having good relationship with Russia also. You are having good relationship with US also. So these new alliances are being formed, and none of these alliances are watertight. So this is again cause of criticism of following a strategic autonomy. They are saying that this has led to challenges to what we call as a multilateral world order. This has led to challenges to what we call as a multilateral world order. The multilateral world order is failing. Rather, there is an increasing reliance of the minilaterals, like, for example, expansion of BRICS, expansion of SCO, or formation of alliances under Quad, IMEC, I2U2, etc. So our strategic autonomy is also criticized for the purpose that they say that following the strategic autonomy, India is giving boost to the rise of minilaterals, and this is a dent on the multilateral order, which is already very weak. So this is what is happening. And the last thing that they say, that there is selective criticism on the part of India. Selective criticism on the part of India, meaning thereby we will say that this is not an era of war, this is not an era of conflict, rather it is an era of development and peace. But we will not criticize Russia directly. We will say that both the countries should exercise restraint. So whether it is Hamas or whether it is Israel, both the countries should exercise restraint, but we will not come out in open and criticize them. So we will provide humanitarian aid to Palestine or the people in the Gaza. We will support the cause of the Palestinian statehood, but we will not openly criticize Israel for its attack on Gaza or for its humanitarian violations that are happening in Gaza. So India engages in selective criticism. So this is the criticism of our strategic autonomy as a policy. You just need to remember these heads. First criticism is India plays as a role of fence sitter only, not taking any principled stand. Second is due to its pursuing of its strategic autonomy and its energy or security interests, they indirectly supports the aggressors. Third thing is that it has led to the formation of new alliances where the world is now even more divided. If the countries will say, every country will then say that we are following strategic autonomy. So it will lead to formation of multiple alliances, and this multiple alliances will make sure that we get transformed back into the era of Cold War. Then there is a rise of minilaterals. Already the multilateral system, for example, like UN, is very weak. UN is not able to stop the conflict between Hamas and Israel, nor has been it able to stop the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So this has led to rise of minilaterals, where every country, in order to focus on a region, in order to focus on a specific interest, has led to the formation of minilaterals. This has been proven, and then they have been basically saying that India is selective in its criticism. India is not direct in its criticism. India is not directly criticizing the countries who are responsible for the conflict. So this is what is happening with regard to the criticism of strategic autonomy. What is India's stand regarding the principle of strategic autonomy? Why India is following it? Because it is reflected in national interest. It keeps the space open for dialogue and diplomacy. It is in line with the principles of strategic autonomy that we have followed in the past. Conflict does not involve directly India, so why should India believe or India jump into the matter? Ukraine or Russia crisis hai, so why should India jump in the matter? It is stuck between the between principles and pragmatic decision, and we believe in the ideals of the UN Charter and the international law. So whatever it is written in the UN Charter or the international laws like UNCLOS, we believe in that rather than following principles or whatever we deem fit. Even though India is following strategic autonomy, this doesn't mean that we are following whatever we want to. Our stand is always principled. So India's stand is in consonance with whatever is written in the UN Charter and with whatever is written in the internationally accepted laws, for example, the laws under the UNCLOS. So this is what we call as the India's principled stand with regard to the strategic autonomy. We'll just take a break of 1 minute and then we'll return. So this was about strategic autonomy and what we call as India's stand and what is the criticism for the same. Now we move to the second thing that can come as a part of question, that Indian foreign policy today highlights a series of changes which are aligned with the current geopolitical realities of the world. Indian foreign policy today highlights a series of changes which are aligned with the current geopolitical realities of the world today. How Indian foreign policy today highlights other series of changes. We will discuss two different questions in this manner, where there is an element of change in the Indian foreign policy and what are the steps that Indian foreign policy is taking in addressing the different concerns. First part is this. The second question that we will take is that there are elements of both continuity and change in the Indian foreign policy. So we'll understand both the things. So what is to be written in intro? अब ऐसा कोई क्वेश्चन आएगा तो हमें इंट्रो में क्या लिखना? The thing that we need to mention in the intro is simple, that India has a large and expanding economy. The population is also very high. And in this course, we have to take foreign policy decisions that are coupled with the changing political and security dynamics in the post-Cold War era. So to address the needs of the large population, the economic stimulus, we need to take such decisions that are basically relevant in the post-Cold War era. So what are the things that we need to follow here? What are the things that we need to understand how India is having different set of changes? India is having different set of changes because now it is focusing on each and every area of foreign policy. Whether we talk about the neighborhood, whether we talk about the extended neighborhood in the form of ASEAN countries, West Asia, Middle Eastern countries, or that of Central Asian countries. We are also looking for partnership with the African countries. We are still progressing on the partnership with regard to the reforming of multilateralism. So let us understand how India is changing its foreign policy stand, or basically using its partnership in this area. First thing is that we are focusing on economic diplomacy. The changes in the foreign policy is that now India's economic policy, India's foreign policy is primarily dedicated to support India's economic diplomacy. And how it is done? It is done through engaging foreign direct investment in India, engaging with the Indian diaspora globally, and India's participation in the multilateral and the regional forums. So the key change to Indian foreign policy today is giving primacy or focusing on the economic diplomacy. The second thing is that we need to manage the great power relations. So India is playing a balancing act. This is also reflected by the principles of strategic autonomy, that we have signed 4 foundational agreements with what we call as US, with current the most recent of the same being LIMUA. But at the same time, we have also signed an agreement with countries like Russia. The same agreement of logistical exchange we have also signed with the countries of Russia. So what we are saying, that we are balancing the big powers, and this has been done by India in the past under NAM also, and this is now being continued under strategic autonomy also, where we are balancing the great powers and their relations and Indian relations with them. So this is the next thing that we are doing. We are also focusing on countering the rise of China. Countering the rise of China, China has become increasingly aggressive, particularly after the Galwan clash. We are also seeing manifestation of partnership between China and Pakistan in the form of CPEC that violates our territorial integrity and sovereignty. So what we are doing, we are basically leading to a situation where we are partnering with countries or the like-minded countries under the organizations like that of Quad or under the cooperation over Indo-Pacific. We are also trying to reinvigorate our neighborhood. So what we are trying to do, because we are seeing China is increasing its presence in the Indian neighborhood, so we are also increasing our partnership with the neighborhood. So we have moved beyond SAARC, even though we want SAARC to be reinvigorated, but we have moved beyond SAARC now, and we are focusing on the partnership under BIMSTEC, BBI, and etc. So what we are trying to do, that there is a change in foreign policy, that now we are no longer reliant on our own capacity, but we are ready to partner with the like-minded countries. And where does this like-minded countries come from? These like-minded countries come from the area like that of Quad. We are partnering with Australia, Japan, US, or what we are partnering with the Southeast Asian countries under the Act East policy. We are also giving focus on our neighborhood, because these are the countries where China is increasing its influence through its debt trap diplomacy or any other means, through string of pearls, etc. So we are also trying to give a response to the same. So we have launched various projects like Project Mosam, Project Sagar, security and the growth for all in the region. All of this has been done to counter the rise of China and to reinvigorate ties with the neighborhood. So this is also an element of change in the Indian foreign policy. The Indian foreign policy under what we call as Act East policy. Now this Act East policy or Look East policy, which has now been transformed into Act East policy, has been transformed to give a new vigor and a new life to the Look East policy. And this includes now countries which are as far as Japan, South Korea, even Australia and New Zealand. So we are following this Act East policy. And this Act East, this Look East policy, which was primarily to increase the economic partnership between India and Southeast Asia, has now transformed. It has now transformed into a full-scale diplomatic and even to the level of military partnership, in the sense that we are not only a member of regular meetings at ASEAN, but also meetings like that of ADMM plus, which we'll cover when we'll study Southeast Asia, ASEAN's Defense Minister Plus meeting. This is a security mechanism. And even we are exploring partnership with the members of ASEAN, for example, in Singapore, in order to counter disguised string of pearls of China. India has come out with its own necklace of diamond, where we are also coming up with the extraterritorial naval facilities. For example, the Changi Naval Base in Singapore. For example, the Dukma port in Oman. For example, the Agalega port in Mauritius. What we are seeing this? We are seeing this as a counter to coming of Chinese influence. So we have increased our partnership from just being an economic partnership to the level of strategic partnership between these countries. We are still looking strong for the countries in our extended neighborhood, for example, in Central Asian republics. So we have been a part of SCO. SCO has also been expanded. And this SCO, we are looking to offset our energy demands or our other demands that are being met through the Central Asian republics. We are not restricting ourselves to the Central Asia. We are also pushing for our India's partnership with the West Asia, where this West Asian partnership has transformed just from a buyer-seller relationship to that of what we call as the mutual development and capacity enhancement. Buyer-seller, ये नहीं कि सिर्फ oil खरीद लिया और oil खरीद के लिया है, no. We are transforming our relationship from just a buyer-seller relationship to that of mutual development and economic partnership, capacity development, in the sense that UAE has said that they will invest $75 billion into India. Saudi Arabia has identified India as the core part of 8 core countries they want to increase the partnership, and for this purpose they have established Strategic Partnership Council. The two countries have established Strategic Partnership Council, where Saudi Arabia has not only identified India as the 8 core countries, established a Strategic Partnership Council for the same, but under the vision document, they have also highlighted that they will invest close to $100 billion in India. So this partnership is also changing. That this partnership is changing in the sense from that of just being a buyer-seller to that of mutual coexistence and mutual partnership. India is also pushing for its partnership, though we were dropped by Iran from the Chabahar port development phase 1, but we are now aggressively participating in the development of Chabahar port phase 2. And at the last, we are also engaging with the partnership in the African countries. For example, we have launched India-Africa Foreign Forum Summit basically to target African continent as a whole and to target all of the countries of Africa. This is one thing that we are doing. We have been, why we are doing, because we were traditionally focused on the countries of West Africa. One of the criticism of India's policy with regard to Africa was this only, that when India was practicing on its partnership with the with Africa, we were focused on only the West African countries. Why? Because West African countries were nearer to us. But now to solve this problem, we have launched a forum summit with Africa, which is called as India Africa Forum Summit, to come out with the guideline for whole of the Africa as a whole and not just the West African countries. We have also included, because we know that we have limited capability. Now India has a limited capability in terms of the financial output or in terms of the technical understanding. So what we have done, we have included partnership with like-minded countries like that of Japan, and we are pushing for a thing called as Asia Africa Growth Corridor. We are pushing for a thing called as Asia Africa Growth Corridor, for which we have included Japan, which will not only provide us with the technical expertise, but will also provide us with what we call as the financial and the technical aid for the same. So this is what is the change, where India is now coming out of silo and it is engaging with all the partners in the region. And this is how which it reflects the changing foreign policy status. What we need to do further, what we need to do when we move forward. India is very clear in one thing. India is very clear in one thing, that India's status is not that of great power. We are not as strong as China. We are not as strong as US. So, and we do not consider ourselves to be as strong as US or China. India is neither one of the great powers, nor we are not one of the great powers, nor we are the minor powers. We are at best the middle power, and we see ourselves as a responsible middle power. So India has to progress on the same. Second thing is that India should go for the era of multi-alignment and that of all alignment. This is not an era that where we can go for NAM or another things, but we have to go for multi-alignment and non-alignment. Third thing is that India does not need to fall, that its relationship with China cannot improve in the future. There has been conflict between India and China from the very beginning. But this doesn't mean that India's relationship with its neighborhood, its neighbor, particularly with that of China, cannot improve in the future. It is not the cornerstone of relationship. So near-term problem should not be concluded into a far-fetched or into a lifelong problem or a permanent problem. It needs to be recognized that both the countries are civilizational states, and India needs to follow a policy where it should not completely close the doors for China and for all the time. So this is what we are following in the terms of way forward when we talk about the changes coming into the Indian foreign policy and how it is being conducted. This is one part of the question. Now, the second part of the question that can come, or second form of question that can come, is basically what are the elements of changes in the foreign policy? What are the elements of changes, continuity and changes in the Indian foreign policy? The question says that there are more elements of continuity rather than change in the Indian foreign policy today. In the last question, we have seen the element of changes where we are progressing on every area. But here the question says that there are more elements of continuity rather than change in the Indian foreign policy today. Comment. So we have to comment on this question whether this statement is right or wrong. So we have to identify the elements of continuity, and then we have already seen the elements of change. So we have to identify the change. So let us understand what are the elements of continuity. First, we'll write the introduction for the same answer. This introduction for the same answer will come with the definition of foreign policy that I have already told you in this class, that foreign policy is nothing but it is a predisposed set of guidelines that are being determined by a country to maximize its national interest, which is dependent on history, geography, and importantly the leaders at the time which is being followed. So foreign policy is basically a set of predisposed set of guidelines that any country will follow in order to maximize its national interest. And this can be determined on the basis of history, geography, economical position, and also it is dependent on the leaders on how they are conducting the economic policy or the foreign policy of that. So what are the elements of continuity? The elements of continuity in Indian foreign policy can be understood with the example of the areas of the focus. With the example of the areas of the focus, we can say that India has all the elements of continuity in its foreign policy. What are the elements of continuity in Indian foreign policy? कहाँ कहाँ हम कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं, कैसे पता चलेगा ये? जब हम एनालाइज करेंगे कौन से एरियाज है जहां पे फॉरेन पॉलिसी इज द सेम. Let us understand the areas where the foreign policy has the change. The area of continuity is seen in the neighborhood. When we talk about the times of Prime Minister Nehru, when we talk about the later leaders, when we talk about P.V. Narasimha Rao, when we talk about Gujarat, every time we have seen that primacy to the neighborhood has been given. Whether it was under the starting from Nehruvian era, where we have signed the peace deals with countries like Nepal, Bhutan in 49 and 50, or when we came out with the principle of non-reciprocity under what we called as Gujarat Doctrine, under Gujarat Doctrine, which was based on the principle of non-reciprocity. And today also the primacy is given to the neighborhood, where the leaders of the neighborhood are called in the swearing-in ceremony. And also it is reflected by the current policy which is being followed. It is called as neighborhood first policy. So what is happening, that the primacy accorded to the neighborhood from the very beginning has remained the same. It has just transformed in the sense of name. Earlier it was signing of peace deals, then it was on the basis of principle of non-reciprocity under Gujarat Doctrine, and now it is called as neighborhood first. Even the swearing-in ceremony was attended by the head of the states of the Indian neighborhood. So this highlights that there is an element of continuity. Neighborhood was important, neighborhood is still important today in case of India. Focus on extended neighborhood. So focus on extended neighborhood has been the same. Whether it is talking about Central Asia, whether it is talking about what we call as West Asia, or whether we talk about the East Asia. So for East Asia, there was policy of look east. Now we follow the policy of act east. With West Asia, we had the policy of look west. Now we call it as a policy of act west. And with Central Asia, we have earlier launched a policy of look north. Now it has transformed into the connect Central Asia policy. So what we are seeing, that again the area of focus in the extended neighborhood, due to its strategic importance, due to its energy importance, remains the same. West Asia is important for us for our energy security needs as well as our economic needs, because that area is basically responsible for majority of the trade that India does with the foreign world. So it is very important area for us. Second thing, energy security needs are very important in West Asian region. Central Asia is very important strategically because it provides us access to what we call as the Central Asian region. Not only access to the Central Asian region, they are rich in the energy resources. They are rich in the non-conventional energy resources like that of uranium. It provides us a strategic edge to see what is happening in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And also it is a part of the international north-south transport corridor. So we are basically having primacy on Central Asia. And thirdly, when we talk about the East Asia, the partnership with the ASEAN countries is of utmost importance. We have launched Look East in the past. Now we have Act East. Why? Because of the growing prominence or the growing aggressive rise of China. And many of the ASEAN countries has their conflict with China in the Indo-Pacific region. And Indo-Pacific is a major construct for India also. So this is what we are understanding, that extended neighborhood has been always important for us, and it still occupies that same position. And this same position is reflected by the policies like that of Act West, Act East, or like that of Connect Central Asia policy. Same चल रहा है, सिर्फ नाम change करा है. Area of importance is still the same. When we talk about Strategic autonomy. I have already told you strategic autonomy is nothing but NAM in a different avatar. What we used to follow under NAM, how we used to balance the strong powers or the powers like USSR and US during the time of NAM. Today, we are also following the same strategic balancing. We know that we are living in a multipolar world order. So this is a time of what we call as world alignment or multi-alignment or all alignment. And for this, we need to follow the foreign policy as dictated under strategic autonomy. India from the very beginning has been saying about reforming of multilateralism. इंडिया ने बहुत शुरुआत से बोला है कि यूएन को रिफॉर्म करो, that the United Nations Security Council should be reformed to represent the interest of the third world countries. It has always said that there is a need for growing voice of the third world countries, and India has been pushing for voice of Global South Summit today, or whether it is inclusion of African Union under G20. What does it indicate? That earlier also we were saying about reforming of multilateral institutions, and today also we support the same demand. So there is also a continuity in the sense of foreign policy when it is talking about reformation of multilateralism. Then we have a equitable world. Equitable world meaning thereby we believe in the concept of progressive internationalism. We want about reforming of multilateralism, but we still support the idea of multilateralism or what we call as progressive internationalism. Progressive internationalism means that there should be a rule-based, open and inclusive world order where the countries should be based on the matter of where the countries should have relations on the matter of rules rather than of their economic or military standing. So we still want an equitable world where the countries, whether big or small, whether strong or not strong, they should have the equal voice when we talk about it. So this is what we need during this time, an equitable world. So these highlights the trend. ये क्या दिखाता है? ये दिखाता है that the Indian foreign policy is continuous because the areas of the focus, the principal stand of India has always remained the same. It is just the name and the way in which it is done. So what is the changes now? अब अगर ये सब हम बोल रहे हैं कि ये सब तो continuity है, तो changes क्या है? What is the element of the changes in the Indian foreign policy? Is there any change or not? So the only changes that comes to a foreign policy is that the way in which it is conducted, the way in which it is conducted. So today it is conducted in the stand of hyper-energetic diplomacy. Hyper-energetic diplomacy. Hyper-energetic diplomacy means that there is a growing trend of frequent bilateral summits, which has increased under the current leadership of Prime Minister Modi. This frequent trips leads to development of personal bonhomie, and this personal bonhomie is very important. For example, recently there were few Indian Navy ex-personnels that were basically imprisoned in Qatar, and there was serious charges against them, and they could have been convicted for life or could have been provided the death penalty. Now the personal bonhomie of the Prime Minister Modi with the head of the state of Qatar has led not only to the deconviction, but it has also led to the people being sent back, or these Navy personnel being sent back to India. This is a result of hyper-energetic diplomacy, which is characterized by frequent bilateral summits and the personal bonhomie that has been developed. There has been an increasing focus on maximizing the soft power potential. Soft power potential, for example, acceptance of yoga. So now what is realized, that the world has realized all over the world that this is not an era where any country can progress with the same, that I am a very strong economic power or I am a very strong military power, so every country will abide to me. No. Every country now know that there is a need for hybrid or a mix of soft and the hard power. There is a mix of both the things that we need. Hard power is basically nothing, but it is in the form of military and economic aid. This is hard power. Anything which is tangible, which you can count. So you can count that $5 million has been given by US to India. So this is tangible. Military power. S-400 system has been given by Russia to India. This is tangible. Soft power is not tangible. You cannot count soft power. But soft power definitely have an influence. It is through this soft power US was able to establish its hegemony in the world. For example, the ideas of liberalism. So every one of us will always aspire to go to a country like US. So this is how they are using soft power as a technique, where they are using the technique of liberalism, the quality of life, the freedom of actions that is present in US. So now India has also realized that because India, first thing is that hard power has its own set of limitations. Every country has a UN Charter gives them a right to have an independent foreign policy. So using military or economic aid, we cannot arm twist any other country. First thing is that. Second thing, India has realized that India has a very limited capacity. We are not as economically strong as China or US. We have a limited potential. So you can use this military or economic aid in a very limited way. So India realized that this is the time that we will use the soft power credentials. And how we'll use the soft power credentials? By maximizing the concept of or internationalization of day of yoga, or what we call as the festivals like that of Diwali, Holi, etc. being celebrated at different places, or using the soft power credential in the form of Bollywood movies, or using the soft power credential in the form of India's neighborhood, particularly in the form of Buddhism and Ramayana. So we have established Buddhist and Ramayana circuit. So this is what we have been doing. So this is what we have to understand. And last thing is that India is now also advocating for para-diplomacy. What do we understand by this para-diplomacy? This para-diplomacy is very simple. Para-diplomacy is that earlier, since foreign policy is a prerogative of what we call as the center, and foreign policy is a prerogative of the central government, we are using the para-diplomacy now. What does this para-diplomacy mean? This para-diplomacy means here that we are using para-diplomacy things in the terms that we are allowing the federal units means the state are allowed with the due permission from the center to enter into relations or economic partnership with the other countries. So Andhra Pradesh will be allowed to enter into economic partnership with any of the foreign country by taking due approval from the center. So we are envisaging para-diplomacy. We are pushing for the concept of sister cities. We are pushing for the concept of cooperation between state government and that of a foreign government, provided that you take a due approval from the center. This was not practiced earlier. So this is also a changing trend. What are the changing trends? First change is that of development of hyper-energetic diplomacy, which is characterized by frequent bilateral summit. Second thing is development of personal bonhomie between the leaders. For example, Narendra Modi, you will see that he is now not only widely respected, but there is a personal bonhomie. जब नरेंद्र मोदी बाहर किसी से मिलते हैं ऐसा लगता है कि दोस्त हैं उनके. So there is a growth of personal bonhomie. Then we have in the form of soft power diplomacy, whether it is yoga, festivals, Bollywood, Buddhism and Ramayana circuit, or even someone has said in the chat box regarding Ayush medicines. So yes, they are also the same. And we have also the thing called that of para diplomacy, that we are engaging. The federal units are being encouraged to enter into direct partnership with the foreign country, provided that you take approval from the central government. So this is what India is focusing on now. So this is what we are progressing now upon. So this was about India's foreign policy. ये एक part of questions है जो अब हमने क्या क्या पढ़ लिया. हमने पढ़ लिया पहले changing global order, हमने पढ़ लिया strategic autonomy, how India is acting with the changing global order. India is balancing it through strategic autonomy. So we have also studied what is strategic autonomy. Why do we need strategic autonomy in the first place? How we are using strategic autonomy and what are the criticism for the same. Then we have seen the elements of change and elements of continuity in the Indian foreign policy. This finishes off our first understanding of the topic. Now we'll go for the second understanding, what we call and Cold War also. Now we'll understand what we call as the relation between India and its neighborhood. I hope this much was clear. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll move forward with the India and its neighborhood. किसी को कोई डाउट है कि आगे बढ़े डायरेक्ट? हाँ.
Sir, in the energy security point of the changing world order, can we also point out the expansion of BRICS and inclusion of Saudi and Iran like this?
Yes, we can point out anything that is, but there the meaning of that point there was that the dependence on the crude oil or natural gas is declining. There we are trying to say that point, not that we are including them, because there we are highlighting 2 points: is that dependence is declining because the primary dependence on that area comes from US. US is the largest consumer, one of the largest consumer. So एक तो उसमें डिक्लाइन हो रहा है कि इनको खुद का मिल गया. Second thing is that why we are pushing for the same. We are pushing for why they are pushing for the same, because they have realized that in next 50 or 100 years this is a finite resource and this will vanish. So they are also pushing for a new order, and the world is pushing. Third thing is because of the climate change. So तीनों चीजों की वजह से ये हो रहा है कि हम लोग नए एवेन्यूज देखते हैं, and this you can quote with the example of even with the development of EVs etc. तो वहां पे हमारा वो है, आप एग्जांपल दे सकते हो ब्रिक्स का एक्सक्लूजन का, लेकिन वहां पे हमारा जो मीनिंग है वो इट इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम व्हाट वी आर टॉकिंग.
Okay, sir. Understood.
Now we'll understand very briefly the problems in the Indian neighborhood that has been present from the very beginning. ये इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, हमें न्यू डायनामिक्स इंपॉर्टेंट है जो हमारी नेक्स्ट स्लाइड है, पर इससे समझने पहले ये बहुत शॉर्ट में समझ लेते हैं, बिकॉज सम ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम्स इन आवर नेबरहुड हैव बीन एग्जिस्टिंग फ्रॉम द वेरी बिगिनिंग. Let us understand the problem in the Indian neighborhood from the very beginning. First is regarding the ill-defined borders, because our borders are ill-defined. The borders that we have with our majority of the countries is ill-defined. When we talk about the Nepal, the problem in the Indian neighborhood with Nepal, Indian border with Nepal, is due to Treaty of Sugauli. Treaty of Sugauli was basically drafted by the British Raj on the because they were in control of India. Now this Treaty of Sugauli fixes the boundary between India and Nepal on the basis of a boundary line which is fixated by a river. अब इसके कारण क्या हुआ? The problem today that we face in the form of Kala Pani, Lippu Lake or Limpu Adhura, it is due to the ill-defined borders, which India has not signed, but it has been decided by the Treaty of Sugauli way back in 1816 that was drafted by British India because they were in control of the power at that point of time. Whether you talk about the borders between China and India, when we talk about line of control, or when we talk about a line of actual control, when we talk about the Johnson and the McDonald line, when we talk about the Johnson and the McDonald line in the Ladakh region, or whether we talk about the McDonald line in the Arunachal Pradesh region, the impact has been the same. These borders have been decided between India and China by the Britishers and not by India and China itself. So we still face the problem between India and China. The Radcliffe line that we have between India and Pakistan, it is still a point of conflict. Why? Because it has been decided by what we call as Britishers. The problem that we had with Bangladesh, the problem of enclaves, has been solved by India and Bangladesh very recently in 2015, not before that. And this was a problem because of this ill-defined borders, and majority of this ill-defined borders is basically due to the colonial policies and the colonial control. So this is problematic. First thing is this, and this has been still a area of problem. तो अगर आपको ये देखना है कि कौन से area of problem starting से है from 1947, this is one of the problem. Second problem that is still continuing today also, it is the baggage of colonialism. Baggage of colonialism. What do we understand by baggage of colonialism? The thing that we understand by the baggage of colonialism is very simple. That, for example, when we talk about Pakistan, Pakistan was part of India only. In India, Britishers created a very strong, what we call as a bureaucratic setup today. A very strong army, a very strong police setup, a very strong bureaucracy. The end result of that is happening in Pakistan particularly, that in Pakistan there is a theory of overdeveloped state, meaning thereby the instruments of the state, which is the army, which is the police, is very strong when compared to the rights that are to be exercised by the people. People do not know how many rights they have and how they will exercise it. Because the instruments of the states, like that of army and that of police, is very strong. This is called as a baggage of colonialism, because colonial masters have created a very strong police or army just for the sake that they can maximize their rule in India. इनने इसलिए बनाया था कि इंडिया में हम अपना मैक्सिमाइज कर पाएंगे रूल. But what has happened in Pakistan, they are still very strong. So whenever you will see the problem, why it causes a problem for India and its neighborhood, it causes a problem when you will see that any of the civilian leadership of Pakistan, when it tries to solve the problem between India and Pakistan, it will be removed by the army person. And the recent example of this comes from the tenure of Nawaz Sharif, when he was removed from the power, basically for saying that he will be becoming close, we will solve the issues with India. Or when we talk about Imran Khan in his last days was removed by the army, because when that was the time when Imran Khan was saying for calling for the peaceful resolution of conflict between India and Pakistan. So what is happening? Because of the instruments of the state, particularly the army, is very strong in Pakistan. So whenever the civilian leadership, the democratic leadership, tries to resolve issues with India, they will be removed from power. So this is again problematic. The third thing is that in Indian subcontinent, as well as the whole South Asian region, there is presence of large population, and this large populations create an issue of what we also call as linked to poverty burden. Ye still abhi chal raha hai. Large population is linked to poverty burden, and this creates problem because then there is fight for geopolitical conflict for resources, and this you can consider with the example of river water sharing. So we have a problem with the Indus River Water Sharing Agreement, and the Indus Water Treaty में हमें problem है. We have a conflict regarding Teesta Water Sharing Agreement. We have also have a problematic relation with Nepal over sharing of other rivers, for example, Kosi River, etc. So what is happening? That large population and poverty burden creates an issue of race for resources. This race for resources is becoming problematic, and this race for resources will ultimately lead to what we call as poverty, this conflict between the countries. Then there is tremendous diversity in the Indian neighborhood and also in India. This diversity also sometimes leads to conflict between the countries. Then what we call as geopolitical competition. This geopolitical competition is due to dominance of South Asia. पहले है South Asia को कौन dominate करेगा? Then it is also between China and India in this region. China and India in this region. And this is also between China and US. Now the conflict is between China and US. But US knows that only India is capable. What is US trying? There is a conflict between China and US. Now US is trying to restrict the growth of China within Asia itself, to stop China within Asia itself. Now the option that US has is to use Japan, but Japan is not a military match for China. So now US has realized that there is only one country that can provide a counterweight to China. Which country is the counterweight to China? The counterweight to China is only India. So now a conflict or geopolitical competition for dominance of the world is between China and US. This leads to US pushing India in the form of Indo-Pacific. US and India are coming together. When US and India are coming together, it is increasing the chances of conflict between India and China, which we have saw in the form of Galwan clash, and after which the level of diplomatic engagement with China has considerably reduced. So ये हो क्यों रहा है? ये हो इसलिए रहा है क्योंकि चाइना और यूएस का आपस में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है. There is a conflict between China and US. Why the conflict is there? That who will dominate the world? It is a geopolitical competition between China and US. US is using India as a counterweight to China to stop China within Asia. And India is getting increasingly aligned with US. When India is getting increasingly aligned with US, the level of conflict and confrontation between India and China is increasing. So a geopolitical competition is causing problems in India. Then regional multilateralism is not functional. We have a regional multilateral institution called as SARC. It is not functional. No meetings have been held in the last 7-8 years. Why? Because of the conflict between, or the regional rivalries between India and Pakistan. Because of the bilateral rivalry between India and Pakistan, this regional multilateralism is not functional at all. And South Asia as a whole is the worst or the least integrated region in the world. South Asia as a whole is the least integrated region in the world. When South Asia as a whole remains the least integrated region in the world, the economic partnership between India and its neighbor is not developed, or the economic partnership in South Asia is not developed. So there are various theories in political science, which is not important for you, just for you to understand. India and China is an exception to this theory. Otherwise, what has been seen in the world, that the countries who are very prominent trade partners for each other, the countries which are very prominent trade partners to each other, the same countries also have stable relationship. ये एक माना गया प्रिंसिपल. हमारे यूएस से रिलेशनशिप कब अच्छे हुए? When we became a ideological partners for each other, when India adopted LPG policies after 1990. Then we moved towards capitalism and we became attractive for US. The economic partnership between US increased, and economic partnership led to the increase of partnership in the form of political spheres also. So now US and India today seen as aligned. But there is a lack of economic and logistical integration within the South Asia region. The economic trade partnership between India and its neighbor is very less, or between the neighbors is also very less. When the economic partnership is less, this gives less chances of having a stable political partnership or a diplomatic partnership with each other. So these are the challenges that has been present from the very past. Ill-defined borders is still present. Baggage of colonialism is still present. Lack of economic integration and logistical integration is still a problem. Regional multilateralism is still dysfunctional. So what are the changing dynamics today? What are the new dynamics today that we see? The new dynamics today that we see is the failure of SARC, the regional multilateral. This is the same thing that we have studied. I will not explain it again. Then big power rivalry. This I have also explained you with the geopolitical conflict between US and between China, with which US is using India as a counterweight. US is using India as a counterweight to China. This is causing increase in problems between US, India and China. As a result of increasing problems between India and China, the net result of this increasing problem between India and China क्या है? Net result इसका ये है, जब इंडिया और चाइना के बीच में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है, कि इंडो पैसिफिक कंस्ट्रक्ट की वजह से India and China are not having a stable relationship. Then the new dynamic, which is a recent phenomena, is political and economic crisis. Bangladesh has failed. Bangladesh has failed, wherein we have seen that Sheikh Hasina has come to India because of the crisis in the leadership. Myanmar is under military coup. Sri Lanka faced the economic crisis. Pakistan, there is doubt over the handling of power by the civilian leadership, where every major decision is taken by the army. Nepal, there is an emergent political crisis. And when we study Nepal, I will also explain you that there is an emergent political crisis there, because the government of Prachanda has now basically losing its confidence, and the KP Sharma Oli faction, which is seen closer to China, is coming into power. So there is a political and economic crisis in whole of the India's neighborhood. There has been a political and economic crisis in the whole of the Indian neighborhood, and this is creating challenge in India's neighborhood and how India can materialize its relationship with its neighborhood. जब वहाँ पे political और economic crisis है, जब बांग्लादेश में economic political crisis हो गया, then how India will maintain the relationship with them? So this is also problematic. The smaller countries are also playing the China cards sometimes. The smaller countries, for example, take the example of Maldives. They are also playing the China card. Or for example, Nepal, the Oli faction, the KP Sharma Oli faction is seen closer to China, and they will play the China. So this is again problem. There is the issue of assertive China in our neighborhood. As China is becoming more and more assertive, and this conflict and confrontation between India and China is further increasing as China sees us moving closer, as China sees us moving closer to US. There is lack of trust towards India. There is also a lack of trust towards India. This lack of trust towards India is due to the big brother image. Due to the big brother image that India gets, that India is seen as a big brother, as a bully, than being seen as an equal partners. There is presence of 3 nuclear powers in Indian neighborhood. So this raises what we called as insecurity dilemma. This is what we call as insecurity dilemma. And last is, which is the most problematic concern today, is the return of Taliban in Afghanistan. What we have feared with the return of Taliban in Afghanistan is now coming true. What was the fear that we have with the coming of Taliban in Afghanistan? The fear that we had with the coming of Taliban in Afghanistan was deteriorating security situation in India and deteriorating relationship with the neighborhood. So what is the deteriorating security situation in the India? That you might see after coming back of Taliban power in Afghanistan, the demand, or there has been a resurgence of demand of Khalistan in India, or the attacks that are happening in Jammu and Kashmir, particularly during the last months. It has increased manifold. And when we have caught these people, when the terrorists have been killed in the encounters, when we have seen their weaponry that they were using, these are the same weapons that were left behind by the US when they decided to vacate Afghanistan. Same weapons those time use हो रहे थे, अभी हमें यहाँ से मिले हैं उन टेररिस्ट के हाथ में जो जम्मू एंड कश्मीर में अटैक्स कर रहे हैं. So this is the impact of the same. Taliban in Afghanistan is also the new dynamics. It is creating security situation for India and hence deteriorating our ties. Taliban has basically also decided, or the Afghanistan has decided to close down its embassy in India. So the relationship we had with the civilian leadership in Afghanistan is now no longer existing. So this is what we study in the form of new dynamics in India. In the next class, we will start with the neighborhood first policy and assessment of the neighborhood first policy. What are the challenges that we face in the neighborhood first policy and how we can improve the things. And then we'll move to the India and Bhutan, then India and Nepal, and then correspondingly all the nations. In 2 slides, we'll complete all the nations of our neighborhood. We'll have the next class on Monday and we'll continue it for 2.5 to 3 hours. We'll try to have it for 2.5 to 3 hours such that you can be freed at a time which is, because the less time is now left for the mains, so you can basically progress on the same. I hope that the first class was clear to you. If you have any doubts, you can ask now.
बोलो भाई बोलो आप.
Sir, will you be sending the slides with the annotations as well?
If you want with annotation, I can send you with the annotations.
That will be
Otherwise,
helpful
everything
because-
what I'm explaining is.
Can you once again tell what you're
What?
saying?
I was saying that whatever it is written, you will get it in Compass also, whatever I am explaining you, and also within the slides also. So you don't need to panic if the annotations are there or not.
Okay, sir.
Sir, while discussing the topic of strategic autonomy, sir, वहाँ पे आप you said about the why there is a need for strategic autonomy. You mentioned 4 points there. Sir, but that was not in the PPT. Like, वो वाला part.
Okay. But you will get it in Compass. No worries. You will get it in Compass.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll now meet on Monday and we'll progress on the other things. I'll be sharing the PPTs for this class. Okay. Okay.